Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for joining. I got my good friend Kris Kuriger here, and
What's up?
I'm really excited to be able to have a conversation about um, friendships and realities of a pastor, because you are a
Mm.
pastor. But
Yep.
I don't want to say too much. I want him to be able to tell his story, and I pray that this blesses you tremendously. And stay tuned for more. But anywho, Kris, bro,
What's up?
thanks for being the first one.
Yes.
I know. First of many, God willing.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, but as I shared with you, my desire with this channel is to be able to get average Joe guys.
Yeah.
As of right now, you're not a celebrity. You're not a celebrity pastor, or you're not like this multi-million-dollar Christian guru or whatever it may be, right? You're just a local church pastor
Yeah.
who genuinely loves his community, and those are the people I want to getting up front so we can relate to.
Yeah.
But I want to start off a little bit just so your testimony of just how you came to the faith and your walk, and I think organically we'll move through there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were both believers, still are believers. And I grew up in the South of the United States where, going to church was normal
Right.
for us. It was expected in most parts of our town. And, went to church regularly. But for me, as far as like testimony goes, um, I did the right things, but when in that middle school, that classic middle school, high school phase hit for me, um, I really felt divided. I liked in my soul, I wanted to experience what the world had, but I didn't want to leave Jesus.
Right.
So, kind of that duality that I know a lot of Christians experience where, I like Jesus, I want to go to heaven,
Yeah.
don't want to go to hell. And so let's get both have to offer, put them together. But if you've lived life long enough, you know that just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in my 12, 13, 14-year-old brain, I was trying to put it all together. So for me, early on, had some peers in my life that early on, like eighth grade for me, drugs and alcohol became a part of the equation where that was something edgy, something different back in,
Right.
back in our day, J. Cruz. Um,
80s, 90s,
80s,
actually
90s,
90s.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Skateboarders, remember the swooshy hair
Yes.
skateboarder guys? I was never one of those, but I was around them, and I envied their edginess, right? And some of
Yeah.
my friends were skating, and skateboarding was really in, and some good '90s grunge music, and so that scene kind of enamored me. There was an interest there, but of course, kind of with that scene, with those people, came some of the other stuff too, and that really challenged my identity, which is really what that was. Who is Kris? Who am I? What do I want to be?
Right.
All those questions you ask yourself as you're going through your teenage years. And for myself, I didn't get it right off the bat. I didn't answer that question correctly. Um, it was 2 or 3 year journey, probably maybe about 3 year journey for me to find myself in a pretty dark place.
And during that time when you were hanging out with the skateboarders, you were also going to church, right?
Yep,
So you were
still
trying
going
to
to
live a
church.
dual life.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I was. Our youth group was on Tuesday nights. I was there every Tuesday. I was sitting in church listening to sermons, but I didn't want to listen to sermons.
Right.
I was there because my friends were there, and it was expected. My family went, so I never questioned it. I just didn't really want to give myself to it.
All right. Would you say that you never really would process a sermon? So you were hearing a good amen, throw it out there, and
I don't even know if I'd give it that much. Yeah. I think it was just a sit there. Like, I wasn't against it. I wasn't hating on it. It wasn't.
yeah,
I had a youth pastor that came my ninth grade year, and he was preaching the gospel, like the truth, like the actual gospel. And in that, even that ninth and 10th grade year, I was like, wrestling with that. But like I said, man, even Jesus says this: those who have ears, let them hear.
yeah,
I didn't have the ears to hear yet because I was blinded by my sin and by my own choices, and ultimately my identity in the things of this world. And I didn't want to call it that. I didn't want to believe that.
Right. Yeah.
But if somebody were to follow me around for 7 days, it'd be like,
What would you say you think your identity was starting to be molded for? Was it popularity? Was it girls? Was it reputation? Like, what do you think was drawing you towards or more away
Yeah, I
from
mean,
the
in
church?
its simplest terms, I mean, I wanted to be wanted.
Okay.
I wanted
Yeah.
attention. I was the pretty typical class clown, liked to be boisterous, liked to be, I was getting in trouble in middle school and high school for talking and, it's stuff like that. And I would say for me, my goal, I mean, I remember walking in high school, like, I want to know every single person at the school.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, and I went to like 3,000 person high school. So, my brain, it was like, that's the goal. I was like, I want to be known and I want to know, people here. And so,
yeah, even that's a little pastor seat right there. The pastor should know his whole flock. He wanted
maybe.
maybe.
I know the Lord's gifted some
Right.
of those things, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't think about that then.
I know. I didn't think about it until right now. But okay, all right. So then, what would you say? You said a 3-year journey, and then you were also still surrounded by good, solid,
Yep.
teachers or men or
That's
friends. What was the pivotal point that you realized? Like, hold on, I'm living this dual life. I gotta pick. I can't serve two masters.
So a couple things started happening. I think it was my 10th grade year, going into that second semester, kind of going into summer. I had gone to a party with some kids from my youth group, which, that started to bleed a little bit.
Yeah.
Started to be the bad influence. And some of those people weren't into it. They didn't want to be around that. And, I was dragging them down, that whole idea.
Right.
And so some of those people they were some of my closest friends too, started kind of butting up against that. And
So you couldn't keep the two worlds.
yeah.
Separated
They were
anymore.
collapsing on me. And also internally, I was just sick, like sinfully sick. The things that of this world were becoming like I'll take this for instance. This is a good quote. Like there was times where going to school high, where then that would be like, oh, that's funny. Oh, Kris, you're funny. Like,
Yeah.
and then I wouldn't come to school one day like that. And I wouldn't do that often, but some days, I did. But then other days, people are like, oh, man, you're not high right now, bro. What's up? And then they would just walk away. And so instantly my brain's like, all right, you got to keep it up.
Yeah.
You got to keep it up. They're pay attention to you when this is what you're doing. But if you're not doing it, then, that you're not funny. You're not cool. What's wrong with you, man? And also, I begin to be really low too. So, when I wasn't in that mode, I was just lower.
Yeah, you were chasing the high.
Yeah, so I was just lower and then not as excited, not as outgoing. And so people were like, man, what's wrong with you? And I could tell, like, these people weren't my friends. They wanted an image and they wanted to live vicariously through my shenanigans almost. But like you said, the question though is, it all came to that head where party, some people called me out, but ultimately two guys stepped in my life. One was my youth pastor, one was a guy named Brian. One night after youth group, Brian, his name is B-Mac, one of my best friends, best man at my wedding. He approached me in 10th grade, pulled me into a room and said, hey, these are some things that we're hearing in your life. Like, I'm just hearing these things. Are they true? Like, is this true? Like, these things are happening. And my soul was like, hallelujah. Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
And it was a wild thing because everything in me probably should have said, like, get out of my life. Like, who are you?
Yeah.
No.
Get all defensive, but
Yeah, no. I remember that moment. It was like an opportunity. The Lord was like, I need you to be honest about this.
yeah.
And so another guy, 10th grade guy, like, this wasn't some leader. It wasn't like, it was another peer of mine, same age, same class, just saying, look, is this where you're at? He didn't even ask me like anything crazy. He just said, is this where you're at?
Yeah. So he didn't come up with 5 different steps and plans, biblically, theology, or anything like that.
He may have, I don't remember, but I remember the original conversation was very just, is this true? Like it wasn't like, you're doing this, and this. It was just like, is this true? And then I was like, yeah. And I remember he prayed for me. Like, just crushed me. And it wasn't, like I said, it was so like easy, simple.
Good old fashioned. Yeah.
Good old fashioned, just pray for me. It was like, man, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember it was genuinely encouraging. And on the heels of that, conversation with my youth pastor.
Okay.
And I very specifically remember sitting in his Durango in my driveway, and we were wrestling with some of this conversation. He had found out most of these things. Like, I thought I was sleek, but I wasn't. You know how most youth pastors know more things than students do.
Yeah.
But
And you like to admit.
yeah, he knew it before I did. But I remember sitting in his Durango and him asking me this question. Basically this statement. He was like, Kris, you have so much potential. And you're about to waste all of it.
Facts, yeah.
He was like, if you stay on this path that you're on, he's like, you will waste every God-given talent you've been given. He's like, you got to wrestle with that. You know? He's like, and he gave me really practical steps, like right there. He was like, you can stay on this path and live this life, or we can go upstairs and tell your parents everything that you've done. Like, we can go in your house right now and confess and repent.
Yep.
And so in that moment, though, through Brian's conversation and now my youth pastors, you know, it just kind of broke me. I was done. You know, I was done fighting, done doing it. And I remember sitting in that Durango. I can remember that space so vividly, looking down, going, Kris, you've been in the driver's seat up to this point, and this is where you drove this car. You know.
Yeah.
You didn't do very good. You ain't doing too good. You're in all sorts of a mess, and you know that was my point of just saying, all right, Jesus, like, you say your way is better. I don't know, but this ain't working. So.
Yeah.
So in that moment, you know, surrendering myself to the Lord and just saying, all right, this is it. I'm gonna give up. Go inside. We confess those things to my mom and dad. They're crying. I'm crying. Just telling everything. You know, I was grounded for like forever after that.
But even though you were grounded, how free did you feel?
Yeah, I didn't care. It was great.
Yeah.
I didn't care about the consequences.
Clean slate.
Clean slate. Yep. I had freedom because there was no hiding. There was no secrets anymore. There was a lot of secrets in that time period. But after that, a lot of those friends just disappeared. A lot of those people that I lived for, or had to, you know, try to live for them in a sense of entertaining them with my life. The minute I was like, that's not what I'm about, it's amazing how many of them just faded.
Yeah,
just
you
so
stopped
fast.
feeding them, so they found on you a feeding ground.
That's right.
All right, okay. And then I know there's so much into that, but you know, like I mentioned earlier, you're a pastor. So then, how did the whole pastor route come to fall
So
into
even
place?
that same summer, I was basically grounded the entire summer. But I could go to church and I could go to my youth pastor's office, and so I'd go to his office a lot, and he had a big library, a lot of books on a shelf, and I'd be like, "Hey, what's this book about?" And he'd be like, "Why don't you read it?" You know, he was big on reading. And I'm like, all right. So I started just picking up some books off his shelf. And him and I just spent a lot of time together chopping up theology. Had some of those other guys, like Brian, one of those guys that helped me kind of walk through that thing. Didn't leave me. A lot of those some of the youth group kids, like the students there, they loved me. They had already loved me. They just were more excited now that I was kind of like I was walking back towards Jesus. So a lot of those guys were already chopping things up that I hadn't thought about. Starting to get excited about theology, the gospel. The Lord just really lit a fire under my butt that same semester to read and to, you know, guys like John Piper, Tim Keller, you know, Wayne Grudem's systematic theology. Like, I got some good stuff right out the gate that just expanded my world of like, oh, wait, this is who God is. This is what he's been doing. This is, you know, just my whole world kind of blew up as far as it came theologically. And obviously the Holy Spirit was doing his thing too of, you know, sanctifying me. So my last couple of years of high school was just a lot of that. A lot of learning, a lot of growing, a lot of leadership. Wasn't perfect. I didn't figure it all out.
Right.
Some of those girl things came towards the end of high school, some girlfriends and those challenges. But one of the main things for me, as far as my call to ministry, was my senior year of high school. Youth pastor had some of those guys preach through a book of the Bible. So
ambulance just drove by, perfect time.
I was gonna see if you could edit that out.
Yeah.
1 Peter chapter 5 is what he had, or 1 Peter is what he has preached through. And he had let me preach through 1 Peter 5.
Okay.
And that
Ooh,
text,
you still remember. Love it.
oh yes, it's shepherding the flock of God.
Mm.
Is the crux of 1 Peter chapter 5. And he helped me for 3 or 4 weeks before that, prep the sermon, get it together. We came back and forth. He helped me type it out. We manuscripted the whole thing. So, I wrote a whole 30-minute sermon for my youth group to preach in front of them. So my buddies were going, because I was at the end. First chapter 5 is at the end. So, I was watching them, learning from them, and then, present that sermon to my youth group, which is kind of funny because it's talking about elders, like how to be an elder, how to pastor.
Yeah.
But that sermon wasn't for my youth group. I mean, obviously, I hope somebody benefited.
Yeah. It was for you. Yeah.
I hope somebody benefited. But the Lord was using that to say, this is what a shepherd looks like. This is what an elder looks like. And I remember preaching that sermon, literally walking off the stage. I didn't even remember anything. Preached that sermon, walked off, went to the back of the room. This was like 3 years later from probably the same room in my church that brother had called me out in. And I just remember dropping to my knees and overwhelmed with the idea of this is what you should do.
There's something here, yeah.
That you need to shepherd the flock. You need to guard and to love and to feed my sheep, like what Peter said. But I didn't know what all that looked like.
Yeah.
So I talked to my youth pastor, hey, bro, that crushed me. And that was my senior year, second semester senior year. I'm like, oh crap. So I was like, I'm gonna go to Clemson, be an engineer.
Yeah.
I had nothing.
He got you right before you got into anything else.
Yeah. He caught me. Yeah, bro. This is awful. I was trying to figure out what I should do in college, and I was like, I like Legos and building stuff, so maybe engineering. I had that was my scope of what I wanted. I had nothing.
The Legos, love it.
I was like, I like building stuff. I remember as a kid, that's always fun. But the Lord, he grabbed me right there and said, I have a purpose and a plan for you.
He's
and
if I don't get him now, he's gonna go be a Lego engineer.
I mean, listen, there's engineers out there doing the Lord's will, but the Lord said, come here. I got a plan for you. And went to Charleston Southern University for a theology, Christian studies degree. And a lot of people go to college and it's a negative time in their life. For me, I got to start over. I got to step from out of high school that had a lot of baggage into college where day one, that was a complete group of people that knew Kris from the way I could present myself. Once again, I'm not trying to live for them, but I was saying I felt like there was a new freedom that they didn't know the old Kris. So I could really just run after, being a believer and running with that. And some of my friends from high school did come to CSU with me. But those are the ones that love me. Those are the ones that walk with me.
They weren't holding the passage.
No.
Yeah. That's a blessing. That's a huge blessing.
Yeah.
Something that stood out was that pastor told you that all the potential that you were willing to waste if you went down that route. And just because I know you now and I personally know you, I truly believe that same potential you were using to chase that high with everything, instead of getting rid of it, you just transitioned that into what you were allowed to do because you were grounded. So God bless your parents for grounding you. The only thing you're doing is spending time in church. You're well, I got to entertain someone because I'm an entertainer. So that's awesome. Okay. So CSU, you graduated, right?
Yeah, I was there 4 years and got to do a lot of cool things during, serving and just running after Jesus and served it. I served as a youth pastor intern at a big church. I served at my youth pastor actually planted a church when I was in college. So I served at his church plant one summer. And then my last summer, I went to the UK and served with a church plant in England.
So that's when it started, huh? The UK.
Yep.
Man. So I want to save this to the end, but I just want to give a little snippet about it. It's just and now you're getting ready to go to the UK.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in 75 days.
In 75 days, you're going to take you and your family out to the UK. But in regards to your family, you met your wife at CSU, right?
Yep, that's right. Yep, we got married a month after college.
Synopsis, a big old quick little thing about how you met your wife. And
freshman year of college, the first month of CSU, we both came in the same year. She was holding a big gourd walking down the path, and I just crossed her and I was I literally just looked at her and I was why do you have that? Yeah. It was a big gourd. I don't know how to explain it. And she's oh, I was dared to steal this from the calf. Somebody dared me to steal it and I did it. I was like, okay. That was our very first interaction of her nicking something from the cafeteria on a bet, on a dare. And then, the next year or so, we were just in a friend group together. It didn't really conspire until the summer of our second year. We started to talk over the summer and started to chat a little bit. And then we hit it off, and we've been married 13 years now.
Yeah. What year did you guys get married?
2012.
2012?
Yep.
Yeah. And now you have how many kids?
We got 4 girls.
4 girls.
4 girls.
Okay.
Yep.
And just like that. You blink it. You give your 13 years, 4 girls, married, and getting ready to take that whole family to the UK.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
That's awesome. What year did you start pastoring at the church that we met? The church I attend, the church that you pastor for. What's your role there?
So I came in 2016 as a middle school pastor. I really wasn't excited to do that. I'll admit that. I had been a student pastor at a church before that and was enjoying the upperclassmen, high schoolers, because of my testimony and enjoying that. I knew that space was really important.
Yeah.
But the Lord had called us, and I knew He did, and that was pretty evident. So 2016, we came to Church of the Mill and came as a middle school pastor and served in that role up until COVID, 2020. So about 4.5, 5 years as a middle school pastor. And that was great, man. The Lord really blessed that ministry. I was a part of a great team. And then in 2020, DJ and I sat down. He's the senior pastor. And he was like, all right, look, we've got a great student ministry thing going, but we have nothing for young men and young women that happen after high school.
Yeah. So what's that, 18 or what?
18, 29.
All right.
Yeah, so that's the way we kind of drew it up. He was like, look, I need you to be the expert on this. I don't know anything about young adult ministry or college ministry. He goes, but I'm going to challenge you to step up and figure this out for our church, for our context. So I've spent the last 4 years working on that project to get it to where it is now. Obviously, I'm stepping out of that, but to get it to where our church had something for 20-somethings who stepped out of high school and had a next step. Yeah.
Okay. And then was that like an answered prayer that you had, or you mentioned middle school ministry wasn't your thing, and I don't believe you're unhappy with it, but I still believe
the Lord
you would have.
The Lord gave me that. He gave me that ministry. Like, it was good ministry to learn and to grow. But yeah, when the young adult ministry opportunity came from DJ, I was super stoked about it. Like I said, I'd enjoyed working with upperclassmen, and I knew that college students. I've worked with them in student ministry as volunteers, and I was like, oh, they're pretty cool. But they've blown me away. I've loved every bit of it. Loved working with that group. They're always on fire for something. They're always excited about something. Now, sometimes you gotta, get their nose back on what matters, but they're usually pretty hype about stuff, and that excites me. That's been really stimulating over the last couple of years to see their passion and to see their excitement for stuff. And many of them love Jesus and are going after it pretty hard. And to me, as a pastor, I've watched a lot of them mature, and because you leave mom and dad in high school ministry, there is some of that. The parents are still very much involved.
Yes.
And then when you leave that, go into that 18 plus phase,
right?
There just comes different challenges, and a lot of humility that comes, a lot of learning, and so I get them when they're pretty humble. They're like, I don't know how to do this thing. How do I adult?
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, let's figure it out.
Okay. So how many years have you been doing that so far?
So January 2021 was when I started. So a little over 4 years.
Going 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the role I met you in.
Yep.
Yep. So man, I appreciate you sharing your testimony, a lot about you, where you're at. And when I approached you about this episode, my heart was for something that I believe God did without us knowing, of me using the word pursuing friendship, pursuing you. But it totally opened this conversation of just like what it's like to be a pastor. And, I'm not saying this was what everybody feels like, but the general consensus, like, you're a friend to everybody, but not many people are your friend.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about kind of awkwardly, because it's about me, but we're going to do it anyways. It's about just like our friendship and how we met, on how like I had zero desires of knowing you as a pastor or needing pastor needs or like, hey, I'm a young adult and I need this. It was just like, I just remember seeing you at church one day and I just had this overwhelming desire. And I'm like,
yeah, you did.
That guy's gonna be
You literally
friend.
looked at me and you're like, you're gonna be my friend now.
Yeah, I think I said that too.
Yeah, I think you did.
I think I said that. And that came because I just moved from South Carolina. I mean, moved to South Carolina from California. It was in 2022, and I was having a very difficult time making friends. Making friends as an adult, and I think you would agree, is like very difficult.
Yeah.
Especially in a brand new culture, state, city,
and
environment.
being a man,
and having kids and a wife and trying to find a job. Like, it was just so many things.
Yeah.
And my heart was very heavy. It's like, I have a genuine opportunity that I get to pick my friends versus just, these are the friends that I have in the bubbles that I grew up in, and we happen to stick together and move on, and there's beauty in that. But it's also like, man, I get to say, nope, I don't want to be your friend. Nope, I don't want to be your friend. So I don't know. I really don't know what it was, but I chose you, and I said, I'm going to come after this guy that I know absolutely nothing about. I think all I knew was you're the students pastor, or I don't know what you call it, young adults.
Yeah, young
adults pastor.
Yeah.
And I have a heart for young adults as well. But, anywho, so yes, I came up to you and I said, you're going to be my friend.
And all jokes aside, that doesn't like take me aside, because a lot of people, I'm pretty outgoing. Like, you go back to those high school conversations. I like to know everybody. So a lot of my relationships are a mile wide. I got a bunch of them. I got a bunch of people I can interact with. I can walk through our halls of our church and feel confident I know most people. So that didn't like throw me off.
Right.
Yeah. But what I think surprised me was next, was what I didn't expect.
Which was what?
Which is you actually pursued me, though. Like, when you said friend, our definitions were different.
Yeah. So what would you say your definition of friend was? Since you said you're used to having that interaction, what in your brain is subconsciously like geared towards the word friend as a pastor to young adults?
I think a lot of the way, and this kind of goes back to culture a little bit. Where our context is South Carolina. We're in that Bible Belt kind of mentality where a lot of niceties, a lot of, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Like, everyone's smiling, everyone's waving. But the problem is by definition, you would call that person a friend. Like, if you saw someone a few times, had a few good interactions, you'd be like, yeah, we're friends. We've interacted a few times. And you would just say, like, we're friendly. I think we confuse friendly and friend. I think we expect in the South for people to be more vulnerable, and they're just not. We're very welcoming and kind at a distance.
Yeah.
And some of my frustrations that I've experienced with friendships is it's a lot of expectations that are interesting, because sometimes, like, one friend of yours is just somebody that you catch at church on Sunday. Oh yeah, we're boys, we're friends. Do you know anything about that guy's life? Do you know what he's struggling with? Have you prayed for him?
Yeah, true.
Like, is he texting you throughout the week? A lot of those things just never happen.
Yeah.
I don't have, and so going back to like your conversation, like, what surprised me was you did those things. Like, you were actually pursuing, like, hey, when we get together this week, hey, you're my friend now. When are we? When we get the families together, when we have a dinner tonight, hey, when we get that workout in, your expectations were higher from a definition standpoint, where in the South, traditionally, we keep things like kind of the bare minimum in a sense, where it's like, we're friends. That doesn't mean you interrupt my life, though.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned like South Carolina, like back in Cali, that's kind of the same way too. So I think it's just Maybe it's a product of social media. Probably it's we friend each other. I don't know where the root came from. It's you apparently now see. I agree. You see each other a bunch of times, and your first and last name, and you have a rhythm. And you're like, that's my friend.
Yeah. Like, if you genuinely like someone, that's fine. That sometimes you hit it off with people, like you said. Sometimes you don't hit it off with people.
Yeah.
But I think in the South, we're kind of taught to you just kind of need to hit it off with everyone and be kind. You know, don't be rough around the edges, and especially at church. I mean, this could be church culture too. You're a Christian, you know, be nice, you know.
Yeah.
And so then it goes back to what you were making that point earlier about being a pastor. Is more often than not, it's a bit of a quid pro quo, where, you know, my role is to help you with the things and the problems in your life, that's the role, the shepherd. And then the other person is thankful for those, you know, those words of wisdom or scripture or the prayers. And our relationship is almost business in a lot of ways. It's a business. And once again, that's not...
It's not a bad thing.
Well, and it's not even really intended that way. I'm not walking into a counseling room going, I'm going to keep this. No, it's just we do the thing. We work with each other. And then, you know, there's relationship that's built. But I think that's what I'm frustrated about. And that's why I think the way you were looking at just relationships was something that I personally was missing or felt like I needed more of. Was a lot less quid pro quo and just, you know, if I give you something, you give me something back. Transactional, right? Mm-hmm. Transactional love was a lot of what I think we experience in our context. You know, oh, I'll help you out. I'll give you my lawnmower. I'll help you out. I'll come over. But we don't give our souls to people.
That's good.
You know, we share. But I think, I think you know, I remember one time we went to Mexico. We ate some good Mexican food. Yeah. Because you're Mexican, so you're wise in that. You're wise in that area. So we went out some good Mexican food. I remember you like laid out like, bro, I don't need anything from you. Yeah. Like, I'm not asking for like spiritual advice. I'm not trying to buddy up to like the staff at our church. You know, like I generally just like want to hang out with you. And I remember that took me aback. Like I remember you and I talked about that moment.
Yeah, I remember that day. Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like you don't need anything from me? Then not that I'm saying, why are we doing this?
Yes.
But in a sense of like, well, what now? Like I didn't even know how to like go further because it had just been such a limiting, the way in which I was used to interacting with people is that like, you know, you go out to lunch and you talk about stuff and then you do that a couple times a year and you're good friends, you know, but then you were like, no, like I'm here. And it was like, what's next?
Yeah. Because I think that would be when it started changing, because you're right. Like I knew the difficulties of pastors having friends from my pastor back home.
Sure.
So before we moved from Sacramento, I actually ended up, the company I used to work for ended up hiring my pastor to be a sales guy. You know, so then I got to see him in a light where he never stopped being a pastor because he's just a pastor, but now it's almost like he had guards down. We're like, okay, there's no one for me to shepherd and flock. I'm here to do work along, and we're cutting up shoulder. I mean, we're working shoulder to shoulder. I don't know how the conversation started, but he looked at me. He was like, man, it's really nice to just talk to you just as like two normal people and not just like you're one of my church members. And I was just like, and in my head, I'm like, well, I am you're one of your church members, but like, what do you mean?
Yeah, like
he goes, well, I don't have any friends. And that hurt me. Yeah. I was like, what do you mean? You know all these people? And it's just like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, no one checks on me, right? And, you know, and I pray that's changed. And, you know, that impacted me so much, whether I knew it consciously or not, that when I moved over here, I really don't know what propelled me other than just like, you know, I really felt a strong feeling to conversating with you. But since I had that experience, it's just like, nope, I'm going to let this guy know that I want to be his friend. I don't need him to pastor me. Sure. You know, and which I will welcome any wisdom and all that stuff.
And you have a pastor, because I'm not technically so we still have a senior pastor. So those structures, we didn't have to, like your other guy might have been your senior pastor.
Yeah.
And that might have been a different dynamic where I'm one of many pastors on our staff.
Okay. Yeah. So then, after we had that conversation at the Mexican food, and it was, and I was very intentional. I was like, okay, I discernment. I felt, I was like, okay, I think he's holding off a little bit, or maybe he's waiting for like, okay, he's buttering me up for some preaching time or something. I don't know, right? You know, but I was just like, no, I'm gonna let him know, like, I genuinely like just. I need a friend, and one, I want
Yeah,
you to
yeah,
have a
yeah.
friend. I hope it's me. Hope you pick me. But after that point, I do feel like you actually started texting me.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
started pursuing me.
yeah.
So how difficult was it for you to now reprogram your brain as like, hold on, I'm gonna text this guy, and he's not in need,
Yep.
just to, just to hang out or something,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Well, one of the things that you and I had too was we worked out. So I
Yeah.
think there was other things that connected us that we loved doing that we didn't. It wasn't just like, we could work out and talk, and a lot of those things began to grow just
Yeah.
through hobbies and things that you and I were interested in, whether music or something, movies or something. But I think for me, I think the thing that began to allow me just to feel free was I was free from like feeling an expectation. You didn't expect anything from me. You just wanted to be around. And also like some of the ministry things you've been a part of and your desire. I think one of the conversations we had early on too was your desire for authenticity. You're a part of a ministry that's really dives after that idea of being authentic and being a man. And in my shoes, you kind of have to be guarded because there's a guy on our staff that says like basically we're paid holy men. They're like we're paid to be holier, so we have to look holier, and almost there's a sense in which, I'm not saying theologically that's accurate. I'm just saying like from like a perspective.
Yeah, we're human. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, but we have to be above reproach. So like there's that tension as pastors that we actually do have to live chaste and holy lives. The Lord says we're judged more strictly for the way we live our lives. So that's in one side of my brain. So like I gotta hold myself to a higher standard. And then there's the sense of being authentic. So what happens if I'm not thinking or living or wanting to be holy, and I told somebody in my church that, like all of a sudden it's like, well, I thought you were this guy, now you're this guy.
Yeah.
And so the temptation,
That's good. Yeah.
the temptation is to just close off, which is truly hypocrisy, which is what Jesus, spent so much time preaching against. But there's that tension and a thing in my own soul that you've got to be this guy. And so if you're having feelings or thoughts, then you just got to figure it out, because that's not something you need to be sharing, because you have to be there for them. You don't need to give those things away. And that was a journey that you and I think you helped me sort of crack some of that. Was that when I began to share things with you, like when you were asking for prayer requests and just like, how are you doing? And we would just text things and, talking about accountability questions, like it led to being more authentic and in the truer self, where you knew I was Pastor Kris. Like you knew that.
Yeah.
But also you knew that I was human. And so there was a great moment there where I think I felt safe to struggle, safe to shoot you a text in a moment of, temptation. And I had never done that really. I had not had many people in my life. There's probably a few guys that wish they would have wanted that.
Yeah.
But I think our conversation was the first one that you were basically like, no, this is what's going. We're going to be this way. And so you demanded that of me, but also backed it up with relationship. You moved closer to me in that, not further away. You didn't, So to me, that kind of broke some mentality. It's all in my head, man.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, that's
sure.
all up here. That wasn't probably how it should have been, but in a lot of ways, in order to protect my soul, from being hurt or being like, because like this is for real. I'm just gonna say this. My job is on the line. There's a sense in which pastors fail, and I never want to be that guy. And I want to finish my life in ministry, and so there's a scaredness to be authentic, because if you have a temptation, now you're not just struggling, you're having an HR conversation. Like it just goes there, and I think it keeps a lot of.
You confide in the wrong person that unfortunately is not being authentic themselves too.
And so I'm just saying, like, I think a lot of pastors would rather just hide and not talk to somebody, so they just avoid HR.
Yeah.
Right? They avoid having to have like a job conversation because you had a lustful thought. I mean, it's not that. It's probably patterns, but that's what happens is Satan gets you in secret, Satan gets you up back in your own little mind. He's like, you just need to fix this yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not the
And
gospel.
the last person you need is a non-pastor. Like you can't.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't ask
yeah.
them for
Well,
help.
all sorts of different ways. He
Yeah.
tells you how to fix yourself, which is self-righteousness. Which if you get a pastor long enough self-righteous, then he's going to become prideful and he will fall.
Yeah.
And so the truth is, Satan would love to get pastors to shut their mouths and not be authentic with a few mature people in their lives. Once again, don't go on Facebook. You don't spew your business everywhere. You find a true, faithful friend, which I think you showed me that I needed in my life.
Yeah, and I would say you rose to the occasion for sure. It's not that I doubted it, and I genuinely thought that we were going to have a two-way relationship. Genuinely thought, and even though it felt like I was doing a little bit more of the work, like once we got up that hill, it's gone very smooth by then, and you've been able to. Whether I needed nothing from you, like you have provided so much for me.
Sure,
so much. Another person for me to be vulnerable with and whatnot. And
we got lucky that our wives hit it off.
Yes,
like that helps.
That too.
That's always hard with adult relationships, as I know I have friends that like we might be boys, but the wives are like. Ugh. So we got lucky that our wives hang out,
and even our wives were craving intimate relationships of people because she might not be a pastor, but she's the pastor's wife.
Sure.
Right, you got to be careful around the pastor's wife who's going to make it to the pastor and blah blah blah. So even my wife, we both moved here and wanting real relationships.
Yeah.
And there's no knock to our relationships back home in California, but Cali is the speed of life is twice. Like it's so much faster pace out there. Oof. Yeah, and it's not a good environment for genuine. Sit down, slow down relationships that I've learned that we have that out here in South Carolina, which is like what I love and cherish. Like you can actually slow down. Mm-hmm. Like one of my favorite things that I've come to learn and adopt in South Carolina was back in Cali, it's where are we going to go to hang out? Here in the South, it's like, why don't you come over? Mm.
People wouldn't let you in their houses?
It's for various reasons. Is they're already somewhere, so let's just meet somewhere halfway. It's too much work for me to come home, or the house is a mess. I didn't have anything, or I don't have time to prepare anything. So there's like genuine reasons.
Sure.
But here, I took advantage of something that I was craving back home. It's just like, no, I want some genuine relationships that I can talk sin nature with.
Yeah.
And that's something that actually I didn't know until I moved here. And I was like, okay, I'm lonely. I have no friends. I don't know anybody. So God had me exactly where he wanted me. Was just like, well, I'm going to be your best friend. And you're going to fall in love with my word. And you're going to follow me. And that's how it happened. And that allowed me to create a relationship with you. I would say scripture allowed me and helped me pursue you because the scripture was asking of me, what's my heart like? Yeah. So then I was just doing that with you. Like, I was just like, cool. What do you like? What can I pray for you? Oh, for a good day at work. No. You, like you, the person, like your mind and all that stuff. Yeah. But anywho, so transition into, you mentioned that I'm part of this group, which I am, this ministry that we go after authenticity, And one of the reasons we go after authenticity because we believe in accountability, and being accountable to someone will force you to be a lot more authentic.
Yeah.
Would you say since our relationship, since our friendship, have you felt like we've been able to hold each other accountable to go to that higher standard? I'll order it this way better. You said as a pastor, you're held to a different standard, right? Mm-hmm. Would you say that our relationship has helped you be even more accountable to that standard?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, because like once I trusted you, and once I was like, oh, I can talk about my marriage. Oh, I can talk about sin struggles, right? Then I wanted to get to that faster. It was like, I just want to get this off my chest. I just want to open up about these things, about my marriage or about things I was struggling with. So it almost became a point of like freedom to run to that text and just say like, hey, pray for me this day. Like, and even giving you like monologues of stuff of like, hey, this is what happened. And, I've repented and, I've gone back to my wife and just want to let you know this happened. I wasn't proud of it, but in those moments you're like, all right, boom, boom, boom. You hit me with like 3, like, love you. Have you, what have you done with this? And so those things helped me. Yeah. And I think it helps me not be self-righteous, not be prideful, not think that, because the gospel is, I cannot clean myself up. Yeah. That's the gospel. And so it's helping me live the gospel by saying, I am a sinner that is in need of grace. And I think that's what so many pastors don't give to themselves. They don't give themselves grace to be a sinner that is in need of grace. Yeah. And so I think for you, you were able to, and grace didn't mean you just let me do whatever. Grace was like, bro, you're human. It's okay. And once again, there are sins that have ramifications that we never had to deal with. But still fighting those things on a smaller scale never leads them to become things that you actually have to be like, bro, I have to tell, someone else, like you can't just stay in that. But thank the Lord, we're not dealing with those things.
And vice versa, even like that's helped me as well be even more accountable to be in my word. I'm not a pastor, right? So I don't have that you get paid to be holy, right? kind of thing. It's more, I don't get paid to be holy, right? So that means I can go ahead and slack off.
That's right.
Yeah. But man, I remember when you just sent me that text and you gave me that monologue of what happened and whatnot. It encouraged me so much. Like, we're there. Like, it's happening. I'm telling him my life. He's telling me his life. Not just about, hey man, this workout was crazy, or what a message. I was powerful. I ain't gonna lie. That gave me a greater desire to get into the Word. So that way, when you came to me again, I was able to, like, meet you with the Word.
Sure.
And meet you with that, and I want to use that conversation and that thing of just like I would argue that's how we were designed to be.
Yeah.
That's right. Like with the men's ministry and part of the Make War ministry, it's like we're trying to rescue that. Like we're trying to rescue it. We're trying to harbor that relationship. It's just like iron sharpens iron. Scripture says it, and we all know that verse, but it's the friction you felt. Should I text them this? Should I not? That sharpened you. And then there was a friction of just me reading that text and like, okay, I should get into my word, and that sharpened me.
Yeah.
So in your ministry, it's young adults. Would you agree that discipleship is genuinely what they need? Not so much just like being told what to do and just showing up on a Sunday, but that discipleship of accountability, of vulnerability, of like, follow me how I do it. Also, let's do it together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and I'll steal this from a lot of other guys that have written a lot of books on discipleship. But
guys a lot smarter than us.
Yeah. But to me, that we've lost apprenticeship, which if you go back to most of all of history, if your dad was a blacksmith, you didn't learn blacksmith by going to blacksmith school.
Yeah.
You would watch your dad for 20 years, and then your dad would hand you a hammer and say, "You've watched me, son. It's your turn." And so I think a lot of discipleship is what we're struggling with now. Once again, I'm speaking to our culture, but we move so fast. You mentioned speed. I think busyness is a huge factor in this, and we've outsourced a lot of discipleship to experts. So we give our kids to pastors, and mom and dad aren't living it out in the home. A lot of those factors are at play. But I think to answer your question, like, I think apprenticeship is what we need to get back to. And I think that's what you're describing, where an older man, you go back to Titus 2, when you have an older man and younger man walking together, older woman, younger woman walking together. And when we say that authentic life where there is vulnerability, there is hopefully a maturity in that conversation that's fighting sin, but also not just what we're against, but what we're for. Hey, I see these gifts in you. Hey, I see you growing. Man, a year ago, you weren't even talking about this. Yeah. I try to do that with my young adults. I try to be somebody who reminds them, bro, a year ago, you were asking me these questions, and now you just asked me a question that is so much more spiritually aware and spiritually mature. And that's growth, man. And the more I spend time as a pastor, the terms gardener and shepherd are really the only words that I feel like embody what we do. Where gardening is slow,
Yeah.
but you have to put in the right ingredients. And when you do put in the right ingredients, you see growth. But it doesn't, you look at a plant, you don't just watch the plant for, 72 hours. Oh, a leaf's coming.
Yeah.
But if you do life and then a month later, you're like, oh, there's a couple more leaves on that
Yeah,
plant.
it's probably a lot more
It surprises us how slow it is, but then our life moves so fast that things happen. So in ministry and discipleship, I think, to your point, putting in the right ingredients of spiritual disciplines and biblical doctrine, and then the communal side of living accountably, when you put those three things into that equation, you're going to get spiritual growth, but it's slower than our culture and our life usually demands.
That would
growth.
want it too, yeah. They want it a lot faster.
Yeah. It's taken years for people that know Jesus in our church to get to another level, kind of in that maturity. And I mean, I praise God all day for what he's doing, but we live in such a fast-paced culture that we expect 22, 23-year-olds to just be mature.
Yeah. And that's not to say that God also can't speed up things.
Sure.
Right? It could be like January,
Well,
you're completely here, you add the right ingredients, and next thing you know, like you're leading a missions group.
And I think,
right?
I think Scripture talks about measures of grace, but, I need to use my own story. I think when I got that 16-year-old Kris, a lot happened really fast for me. Mm-hmm. I kind of picked up on a lot of things pretty quick. Different people have different pace, and people are processing things at different pace. But yeah, God gives the growth at that pace for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like to think, if I'm going to be a little fleshly, that I was the last finishing touch for you to be ready to go to UK.
Okay.
But now I get to see it to this perspective. Like, man, like I gained an amazing brother, and now he's moving to the UK, and it's been a bittersweet. I've never once, like when you were being commissioned. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times. I feel like you've been commissioned a bunch of times. But
they keep doing it.
Yeah, but this recent time of this, I broke down crying, like at service.
Yeah.
And it was these emotions I've never felt before of just like, man, my brother, I'm losing him, but at the same time, God is sending him. Sure. And this joy and this pride of, we did it right. Mm-hmm. Like, we did life together. Yeah. We talked about the hard things. We encouraged each other. We spoke truth to each other. And then boom, next thing you know, like, okay, you're off to the UK now. And I'm just like, well, thanks God. Like, he's leaving. But I'm blessed that you are too. And it was just a thing, and my wife's like, look at me, and I'm like, I'm not crying, you're crying. No, yeah, I'm crying. And I've never once have felt an emotion where I was sad that you and your beautiful family are leaving, but I've never been so proud and so excited for another human.
Sure.
Doing God's work.
Yeah.
And I think there's a beauty in that is also why we should have intimate relationship.
Yeah.
So we can feel the winds of the gospel.
Yeah.
We can feel the winds of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And battle with that friction of like, I'm losing my best friend, but then at the same time, like he's doing God's work. This is the reason I would want him to leave.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like UK, man, like how's that been? I know personally that's been a difficult thing, and you've brought to light certain things that I didn't think about, like that people who are going to be sent out got to worry about. Like to me, I was just like, oh, you just get up and go. But there's cleaning a house, there's finding a tenant, there's passport issues, there's W-2s, like all this kind of stuff. Tell me about
you've messed with immigration before.
Yeah, so. Yeah. hey. Off topic.
Maybe your mom did. I don't know.
No, I did. I know it's no fun. But man, like, tell me about this new stage of your life. Like, tell us about, you going to UK. Even like, how did that really started? I know you mentioned your freshman year of
senior year
of Southern. You went to go do
Yep.
A trip to UK.
So that kicked off with I was working at Chick-fil-A. You
Okay.
know, I was
Lord's Chicken.
Lord's Chicken, and we're at Chick-fil-A, and a guy was working with me from Liverpool, UK. So, you know, this 19-year-old kid came to the United States. His dad was actually our men's soccer coach at the college I went to, and so that's why they came over. But he was working Chick-fil-A with me, and got to know this kid. His name was Shane. You know, shout out to Shane. Still a good guy. I can text him right now.
Yeah.
Good guy in my life. But he discipled me in the ways of soccer. I had not really. I played high school football, and you know, I'd always kind of like enjoyed it or whatever. But like he showed me like this is the way. You know,
This is the real football.
this is real football. Yeah. And so I started going to his house on like Saturdays to his apartment, and mom, dad, sister, brother, grandma, like yelling at the TV about Liverpool Football Club. And I was like, where am I? Like, I felt like I went to some other universe stepping into this boy's apartment. But his whole world was like built around this thing. It was awesome. I loved every minute of thinking back on that.
So that's why you like Liverpool.
Yeah, that's where I was discipled as
I
Liverpool
actually never knew
Football
that.
Club.
Yeah.
So a boy in college, we connected over that, and spent the next couple of years. A lot of friends enjoyed soccer, started watching it, started really getting into the Premier League. And at the same time, in one of my Christian studies classes, I was reading a book called Total Church, written by Steve Timmis and Tim Chester at a church called Crowded House. And so I was hanging out with Shane and reading this book, and the book I knew was from England. I knew the authors were English. So I flip it over, and it says right there, Crowded House, Sheffield, UK. And the Lord just looked at me and was like, you can go hang out with them boys. So get on the emailed the church, and was just like, hey, I don't know. I literally remember in my email, I was like, I don't really know why I'm emailing you. I was like, I just feel the Lord like calling me to come hang out with you guys and spend maybe a summer. I was like, I don't know if y'all do internships or something like that. And the sweet lady emailed back. She's like, I've talked with our pastors. Like, we don't have an internship, but we've got a family you could stay with. If you can get over here, we'd love to.
Wow.
We'll put you to work if you get over here. And so, you know, I was working, so I had funds. I made it happen. So I spent May to August of 2011 in Sheffield, UK, working with a church called Crowded House. And they were a church that was gospel-centered and very missional. Missional being their small groups were out in the community, and the goal was to invite neighbors. So their whole mentality was much more outward focused than inward focused. And so we would go to these gospel communities, missional communities, and neighbors would come, people would come, and it would basically be like a introductory Bible study for a lot of people who were kind of exploring Christianity. But then the believers in the room were very honest and vulnerable about sharing. They're very authentic, as we talked about a minute ago, sharing those things. So I just saw this picture of like the church that really blew me away, and was with a guy there named Matt that really showed me he was just an evangelist at heart. We spent a lot of time doing evangelism. But ultimately, over the years, I just felt like the Lord was calling us back. And my wife and I both never felt released from that. So the Lord was preparing me, all these different stops, youth ministry, middle school ministry, young adult ministry. Definitely felt like the Lord was preparing that as always going to be sort of a next step. And we tried to go back in 2015, try to make it happen, didn't work. We went on a vision trip in 2024 and got told, hey, there's really no jobs. Like, you can support raise. It's going to be about $140,000 a year. You probably need to raise.
Yeah.
So not impossible. People do it all the time. So, if you can get over here, just let us know. So we were pretty discouraged about that. But then coming off the heels of 2024, that trip we took, the company that we worked for had no openings. They called us back like 3 months later, like, hey, actually the team in Manchester needs to change spots, so there's an opening. So we were like,
when was this? When was that call?
August of 24.
24, and that's what got set the ball in motion again?
Yep, that reset. Like, we had been on a journey for a long time, but really that trip in 24, we were really excited, but just didn't have there was just not a whole lot of next steps. The doors were kind of closed. And then when that door opened up in August, we had a lot of work to do to get to November. The company wanted a lot of information, obviously. And then, yeah.
What was the biggest hurdle, biggest struggle so far, from that call to now?
The biggest hurdle was my Social Security.
Yeah.
So as a minister, you can opt out of Social Security. You can sign a form and you get some tax breaks for being a pastor. And from kind of find out, Europe and in America have a totalization agreement, which means it's a good thing, which means you don't have to pay double Social Security. So whichever country you are in, I think you pay their tax, whichever proceeds you're basically benefiting from.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to pay the former countries. But I opted out in America. I opted out from the United States' Social Security system. England's like, all right, well, you can't opt out of ours. And so that created a $16,000 yearly conversation that the Lord worked through different circumstances to make that happen, to make that go away, basically. So that was a huge hurdle so it's funny because I said that there was a spot opened up in Manchester and we're like, let's do it. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, HR was like, oh, we've got this hurdle, but we have to shut it down.
Yeah.
So it opens up
yeah.
and then closes. And then early October, I got a phone call that they figured it out. They're going to let us keep moving. We're back on, so 2024 was an emotional kind of roller coaster in that way. But since 24, man, the Lord has just popped off. It's been prayer request answered. And so his faithfulness has been the most evident thing in all of this. So yeah, we're excited.
We know your inclination to missions goes upon just you're always surrounded by Latinos and Europeans. My wife's European. I'm Latino and stuff like that.
I got lots of international friends.
If you could speak for your wife, like, how was her heart for missions molded? When you met her, was she already have a heart for it, or what?
Yeah, if she were sitting here, she's articulated this, that she felt a call to missions and ministry before she even met me. Like, that was going into CSU. She had already felt in her soul that missions and ministry would be a part of her story. And so I actually found an email because I got a new computer for the company, and I just uploaded all the emails because I logged in, and I saw one that me and her had sent each other in 2009 or 10, year 1 or 2 of dating. And one of the things was I think there was a quote in there that basically said one day on the mission field, ... We had talked about that year 1 of our dating relationship. Wow. So that wasn't surprising to her. She was right there with me. She's been right there with me the whole time. To talk about my wife, she is actually kind of the one that kicked this back off. So I told you I went in 2015. Mm-hmm. Aubrey went on a trip from our church to visit 2 girls that were on the field serving. And it was just an encouragement trip. So my wife went out to southern France for a week.
I didn't know that she did. Wow.
In 2022, she went out there to encourage some girls from our church, and came back from that trip and looked at me and was like, "It's time. We've been talking about this for a decade," and she was like, "We either need to do this now, or..." Because there was another factor that we had to deal with is our daughter is 11 years old. Now, there's some different opinions on this, but we were told that the IMB didn't want any kids over 12. That from a cultural standpoint, it'd be hard to adjust. So they were trying to keep, if you're going to go to the field with family, they wanted you to be middle school and below. Yeah. And so we knew that there was that tension coming. And also my wife's came back from that France trip really hype about we need to be in Europe. Every minute, she loved every minute of being there. Southern France is beautiful, so that probably helped. But yeah. She's like, we just got to get back to Europe. And she's also a European history major from her degree. She was a middle school social studies teacher with an emphasis in European history. So when she taught for 5 years, she taught Western Civ. She taught all of history that really happened in Europe. So she knows it better than I do as far as historically speaking. But we were molded together for this mission. We feel very ordained.
I would assume then, I've actually never asked you this, I would assume that means your children weren't strangers to your desire to being on mission?
Obviously, their understanding of that grows because, some of them are still little. Yeah. So we were open, and we still watch a lot of soccer in our house. We have a lot of international friends, so yeah, I don't think that they were surprised by that, but I think we were open early on with the possibility, and open like, hey, I'm gonna let you know this is something we're thinking about. And so you got to guard their hearts in some of that. Oh, we're moving. Oh, we're not moving. Oh, we're moving. We're not moving. We were protecting them in some of that, of like, hey, we had a setback, not sure what this means. We heard you're not coming, but we were like trying to help them navigate some of the back and forth. And they listen, man. I can't complain with my kids. They have been very gracious, and they don't know what they don't know. Yeah. But their prayers have been blowing me away. Their prayers, praying for this as well, and what the Lord's doing in their heart, because it takes faith on their end. This is a faith step for them to trust their parents and to trust God.
Especially the older one,
Yeah, Emma, she's 11, so trusting God's plan, and
11 and likes to act 20.
They all are that way. But they're going on a journey too with the Lord here. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to ask you. I know you're focused on missions right now, but you're still here. What would you say the Lord is specifically working in your heart on? Like, whether it's a characteristic of the Lord, whether it's strictly just preparing yourself for the UK, but what now that you know what's happening, all the real final steps are done. It's just a matter of getting to the date. What do you think the Lord is speaking in your heart?
Whew. Lots of things, right? Trying to teach you a lot of things. Let's see, what's the word on that? I would say the Lord is teaching me. I mean, we go back to what even our church has been talking about, His presence.
Okay. I
mean, that's just the thing that's been on a lot of our church's mind lately. Our senior pastor has been really not pushing. He's been working through that in his own heart, and that's been a lot of our conversations as a pastoral staff, is doing a lot for the Lord and missing the Lord. And desiring His blessings rather than Him.
And that's easy to do, being paid to do the work of the Lord, right?
to move the needle, right? You're paid to produce. And in our consumeristic culture, production doesn't always equal presence. And so that's where we have to, and the Lord's been teaching us that kind of idea has been on my mind as well, because there's a part of this next 6 months of my life that actually the company is asking me to really not do a whole lot. They're just saying, you need to take care of your family. You need to get situated. You need to know where your grocery store is. You need to know where the gym's at.
Well, that's good.
And so I think that in this next phase that we've been talking about, I'm just a church member. And I haven't been that in 13 years. And so
an
opportunity, like you're saying, what the Lord's teaching me, to just be a child.
Okay.
To just be still. Right?
Yeah.
And to listen. And one of the things, we went to a retreat a few weeks ago, pastoral retreat, and one of the conversations one of the pastors said was that the Lord, that one of the things of man being a man, is to learn to listen to the Lord and his whispers.
Yeah, still small voice.
Still small voice. And that as men, we're used to being confident and loud and, okay, let's move the needle, let's go. And that's not generally how the Lord speaks.
Yeah.
You've got to slow down, and you've got to be still, and you've got to shut your mouth.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited to do that, but I'm kind of scared. He's brought us this far, so He's got a plan. Like I'm in the, the river of His sovereignty through all this.
Wow.
So, but I'm kind of scared of, like, when I shut my mouth and listen, He's like, I brought you this far. Now, let me reveal to you the next phase, which is kind of exciting. Because I've always felt in my brain, like, you got a lot of visions and excitement, things you want to do. For me, moving to the UK was that. So now that it's happening, it's a little bit of like, I have no idea what's after this.
Yeah.
I got like
you didn't even think about what's...
Yeah. You kind of like, oh, there's a pipe dream. Now you're doing it. Kind of like this podcast, right? Oh, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, now what? I'm living in sort of a
little
limbo. Like, all right, God.
And then you find yourself seeking so much what's next instead of being in the moment.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm excited for this next phase, to just be still and like let God reveal himself more. But also to be with my family. Ministry in our context is fast and busy. And so there's an excitement to the Lord, teaching me to make the order correct. You got to have God, your own personal, and then your family, then work. Mm-hmm. It's easy for men to flip it, to go after work, your family, personal, and then the Lord. It's like, and so it's like, I want to make sure I just get those things in the right order.
Man, that's awesome. You're going to have that opportunity to go and make some genuine relationships before you put that pastor title back on.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to plant a church eventually. That's the mission work we're doing, is to, get in there, get after. There's established churches in the UK, so, we're not starting from zero, but they lack shepherds. They lack established, healthy churches. And so just getting over there and be humble, learn. There's a lot of guys over there killing it right now, and just want to get in on that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you making the time, before you head out.
Yep.
How many more weeks you got?
We go to training in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
Yep.
In 2 weeks. Man, I appreciate you. I was excited to have this conversation. I knew, if I was going to start this, I knew exactly who I wanted to do the first episode with. That's cool. Hopefully everything went well on this side, as post setting and whatnot. But man, I appreciate you so much, and I know the Lord has you exactly where He wants you, and I am grateful for your relationship.
Grateful for you, man.
And the good thing is, your iPhone still works.
That's right. It ain't over.
Yeah.
It ain't over. Yeah, I got a telephone.
It ain't over.
I got a telephone.
Oh, we're gonna go out there.
Let's do it.
We're gonna go. My wife has already said that we're gonna go in 2026.
Okay.
She literally said that like a few weeks ago. She was like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait for us to go to England in 26." I'm like, 26 of what? What do you mean by 26? She's like, "We're gonna go next year," and I was like, "All right, sounds good. I'm down. Let's go." But man,
take you to the best spot.
I'm sure this blessed someone. I'm sure it did.
It's free. I mean, I lived it, so
yeah,
it's been good to me.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys watching the whole video. If you got any questions, any comment, want to know more, hit me up. And a little bit about what's going on is that I want to continue doing more of this, of just being able to have genuine conversations with people so that we can be sharper together. Because alone, we're dull. We live a dull life, a boring life. But when we come together as members of the church, a pastor and a Joe Schmo or two Joe Schmoes, it doesn't matter. As long as we come together in the presence of God, we're able to build each other up. And that is how we're sharper together for the kingdom. So God bless you guys. See you on the next one.